Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and we've got some great programs planned for you today. So, today we're going to talk about rays. The program is called World of Rays, and we're going to talk about a couple different types of rays or ray species. We're going to talk about what these animals are, where they live, and some cool facts or adaptations, things that help them survive in their habitat. Now, before we jump into the world of rays, I do want to put up our phone number so you know how to communicate with us. So I've got some friends helping out in the studio. I've got Isabel and Ty, and they're controlling everything you're going to see behind or below me. Now, they just put up our text line. So if you have any questions, if you want to say hello, if you want to share your observations while we're exploring today, you can go ahead and text us at 562 286 1838. So that text line is live. Those texts will come in and then they'll pass them on to me. Or you can also email us. We'll have our email open and you can email us at live@lbaop.org. Now, if you're watching live, which means you're watching at 9 a.m. on May 20th, you can go ahead and use either of those. They are both live. If you're watching after the fact, we're going to ask that you email us instead of texting just because we don't always have that text line open. All right, everyone, are you ready to get started? So we are going to dive into the world of rays, and we're going to start with a species that is local to us here in Southern California. It also happens to be one of my personal favorite animals in the ocean, and we're going to talk about bat rays. Now, you might be wondering why I've got this habitat up behind me. I'm going to step off the camera, and I want you to keep your scientist eyes open and see if you can spot any rays. Now, this is one of our exhibits here at the aquarium. This is our blue cavern exhibit, which is a kelp forest, which is a local habitat to us here. If you're in, pretty much if you're in California, Oregon, Washington, kelp forests are a local habitat. We call this our ocean backyard because for us here in Southern California, that is our backyard. Now, kelp forest, oh, did you spot one? It just went behind. We'll break every time we see a ray. Keep your eyes kind of right around here. There it's coming. I can see it hiding right there. Excellent. All right. Keep those scientist eyes looking and see if we can spot a ray again. So this kelp forest, like I mentioned, is our local habitat. And this exhibit here is called Blue Cavern, which is modeled after a real dive site off the island of Catalina. Now, we have cameras in a lot of our exhibits. If you've watched any of our programs, you've heard us talk about our webcams. So we're watching what's happening in our exhibit right now. So if oh, excellent. Look at that. Our ray is right on cue, showing up for us. It's going to take a little rest. So now we'll see it kind of hanging out right there. All right. Keep your scientist eyes open. We'll see if we can spot our rays again. So this is a blue cavern, as I mentioned, and it's a live webcam. So if I go out of our studio where I am into our great hall, which is where this exhibit is, I'll watch the same thing that we're watching. Now you can tune into our webcams at any time. The link is on our website, and you can check in on these animals. But let's focus on this habitat just for a moment, and then we'll get into the rays. So I mentioned it's a kelp forest. So all this stuff here that kind of looks like plants, that's the kelp. Now, kelp is plant-like. It's not actually a plant. It's actually an algae, which is a little bit different than plants. Mainly, they don't have roots that dig into the soil like plants do. Oh, perfect timing. Did you spot that, Ray? Excellent. Oh, it looks like it's kind of hanging out. Wonderful. So this kelp forest is home to many animals, including some ray species. And there's a couple of ray species that do live in our kelp forest, but we're going to focus a moment on those rays that we've been seeing. Those are our bat rays. Now, maybe you've been to the aquarium before and you've seen our bat rays here. Maybe if you came in the past, you were able to touch our rays, or you've seen them here in Blue Cavern. I think we have 3 or 4 of them in our Blue Cavern exhibit. Now, this exhibit is 28 feet tall, so that's lots of space for our rays to move around. And a lot of times they tend to hang out at the top, but I bet they knew that we were going to be talking about them today, and so they decided to come down to the bottom of the exhibit and show off. All right, I'm going to have Isabel bring up, oh, there's a ray. Excellent. I'm going to have Isabel bring up a picture of our bat ray. Excellent. So here are 2 bat rays. And these are ones that were in a different exhibit here at the aquarium. Now, we're going to take a moment and make some observations. Now, I think we have another picture, which I'm going to have Isabel bring up. It's going to be a full screen picture. And we're going to make some observations of what we notice about this ray. Now, we are going to talk about bat rays, but I want to back up a moment and just talk about what are rays in general? So once we bring up that picture, we're going to take a look at what makes a ray a ray. What group of animals? Excellent. Here we go. So look at this cute little baby ray. So cute. So take a look at this animal and make some observations. Now you can go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. What do you notice about a ray? Now, one thing that maybe you're wondering is a lot of times people refer to them as stingrays, right? A bat ray is a stingray. This one here is a baby cownose ray is a stingray. But I've been saying ray instead of stingray. I wonder why that is. Do you have any ideas? Do all rays have stingers? Interesting question. Now, a lot of them do, but not all of them. And we're going to explore a couple different ones that don't have stingers today. So that's why I've been calling them rays instead of stingrays. Now, the ones that do have stingers, you can absolutely call them stingrays. But because not all rays have stingers, we like to just use the term ray to describe them. But what kind of animal is a ray? Who are its cousins? Where does it fall into when we're talking about animals? Do you think a ray is a mammal, like a human? I don't know. Do we know what characteristics a mammal has? Mammals have things like hair. I got lots of hair. We breathe air. We give live birth. We drink milk. We're warm blooded. Those things don't really fit with our rays. So, rays, they are not mammals. They are actually part of the fish category. Now, I'm going to have Isabel put me on my document camera. I'm going to write out a couple things just so we can kind of keep everything straight. So, we are talking about rays today. There we go. Now, rays are actually a type of fish. Believe it or not, rays are fish. But a lot of times when we think of fish, we think of animals that look like, I'm going to grab a plushie that I have. We think of animals that look like this, right? This is what you think about, something kind of like this when you hear the word or the term fish. But rays are actually part of the fish family because this term fish is really general. And we can break it down into a couple different groups. There's actually 3 groups of fish. So the fish like the one that I just held up, they are bony. So that means that their skeleton inside their body is made of bones. Now, who else has bones? Me, but you could also point at yourself too. Our skeleton inside of our body is made of bones. So, one group of fish, they are bony fish. Now, another group of fish, they have cartilage. So, the cartilage fish are fish whose skeletons are not made of bone like us, but if we took an x ray of their body, their skeleton is made of cartilage. Now, it's kind of tricky because we do have cartilage in our body. If you touch your nose, you can kind of wiggle it around, it's a little kind of flexible. Or if you touch your ear, it kind of is, you can bend it. Your ears and your nose are made of cartilage. Cartilage is much more flexible than bone. I can bend my arm at the joint where there's 2 different bones, but I can't bend the bone in the middle. That would mean I would break my bone. But cartilage, you can bend it and move it in different ways because it's flexible. So there's another group of fish whose skeleton are made of cartilage, and our sharks and our rays fall into that category. So I'm going to say sharks plus rays. And then this third category are our jawless fish. There's only 2 fish in that category. We're not going to spend too much time talking about those fish, but they have no jaw. So our jaw right here that opens and closes helps us talk and eat. These fish don't have any jaws. But there's just 2 of them, so we're not going to spend too much time because today we are focusing on our rays. So we know that rays are a type of fish, but they're a special type of fish who has a cartilaginous or cartilage skeleton. That is our rays. Excellent. So now that we know what these animals are, I see some questions came in. So we're going to pause. Oh, we've got some observations. Excellent. So let's bring up a picture of our ray again. All right, we're going to bring up a picture of a ray and go over your observations. Excellent. So Andrew notices that the mouth is on the bottom. Excellent. So here's another picture. This one is a bat ray. But you notice the mouth was on the bottom. Excellent. And even looking at this picture, we can see, or we can't see its mouth. So we know that its mouth is underneath on the bottom. Excellent observation. Cashin notices it has a tail. Wonderful. And you can see the tail right here. And that tail is important, part of their body. Excellent. And Ariana says their flaps form a triangle. Excellent. I love that we're looking at sort of the shape of their body. So their flaps right here, these are their fins. That is how they swim. And you're right. They do flap them, but they are triangular shaped. Now, that's not going to be true for all rays because different kinds of rays are different shapes. Some are more round, some are more triangular, some are kind of like diamond shaped. It just depends on the type of ray, but you're right. Those two rays we're looking at, this one here, our bat ray, and our cow nose ray, they have triangles as fins. Excellent. And James says they have fins and a tail for defense and steering. Excellent. So I like that we are moving past just making observations. We're kind of thinking critically about what those parts of their body we're noticing, what they're used for. So their fins and their tail can be used for defense and for steering. So their fins, you're right, they're going to be using their fins to swim. So if you have space wherever you are, if you're in class, make sure you don't bump into any classmate. You can flap your arms like your wings, like you're flying, but you're really just swimming through the water. And then you can also steer, kind of move from side to side. And you're right, they help them to steer. And then they are used as defense as well. So their fins are used as defense because it's going to help them get away. So when we talk about those stingrays, the sting is used for protection, but it's the last line of defense. So the first thing a ray is going to do is they're going to get away. So their fins are absolutely used for defense. And then their tail has their stinger on it. So this is a good picture here. We can point out the stinger. So a bat ray is a stingray because it does have a stinger. And right here, see right here, there's a little fin, a little triangle. Right behind that fin is where their stinger is. So a lot of times people think their stinger is at the very end of their tail, but it's actually pretty much where the tail meets the base of their body. And they will often have a little fin right in front of it and then the stinger right behind it. And that is kind of like an identifier of where the stinger is. Excellent. All right, we've got some more questions coming in. All right. Oh, good question. So the first question is from Sam, and it's how are rays related to sharks other than being the same family? So the biggest thing that connects the rays and the sharks is that cartilaginous skeleton. And that is part of what puts them in the same family. Now they have a lot of differences, the shape of their body, their what they eat, how they protect themselves, but that main thing that connects them is that cartilaginous skeleton. That is why we group them together. So while there might be a lot of differences, we group them in that group because of that skeleton, that cartilaginous skeleton. And now our second question is from Corey and is why is the mouth on the bottom? And that is a great question. And we're going to talk about the mouth of this animal because you notice the mouth is on the bottom, right? We had that observation before. And we're wondering why is it on the bottom? Now, what's interesting with animals is you can learn a lot about an animal by talking or by looking at its mouth, where its mouth is, the shape of its mouth, and its teeth inside, sort of the size and shape. And that can help you learn a lot about this animal. Now, rays, why their mouth is on the bottom, that is an evolutionary question. But what helps them with their mouth on the bottom is where they're going to find their food. So if their mouth is on the bottom, where do you think they're looking for their food? Do you think they're going to look above them, in front of them, or below them? If your mouth is down here, where would be the easiest place for you to find your food? Below you, absolutely. So these rays, as you can see, they're kind of down towards the bottom. They do like to swim in open ocean, but they will hang out more towards the shallow, especially when they're eating, because they're going to find their food below them. It would take a lot more energy for this animal to find food above them. Imagine this animal has to swim and turn its body up and then even upside down to get food if it's above them versus just finding food right below them where they're basically sitting on top of their food. It's so much easier and it helps them save energy. And so they're going to look for food that's on the bottom of their body. Now let's see if we can go back to a picture where we can see their mouth on the bottom of any kind of ray. Excellent. Ooh, so this is an interesting one. This is a type of rhino ray, which is just another type of ray. It's a much larger type of ray. And you can see its mouth here on the bottom. And you can even see its teeth sticking out a little bit. So this animal, even though their eyes are on the top of their head, their mouth is on the bottom because they're going to be sitting on the ocean floor, on the sand, and they just kind of move over and they're trying to find their food in the sand. Now, ray teeth are really interesting. So we can tell that they're going to eat things below them because we know their mouth is on the bottom. The next thing we can look at is their teeth, and that can give us clues as to what they're eating. So this rhino ray, their teeth are a little bit textured, but I'm actually going to come over to my document camera because I have a replica. So it's not a real one, a replica ray mouth. So this is the mouth of a ray. Let me adjust. There we go. How's the lighting? Turn it down just a little bit. All right. So this is a mouth of a bat ray. So we've got the jaw here, which would be made of cartilage. And then here, believe it or not, these are ray teeth. Is that what you would think teeth look like for a ray? So ray teeth are actually flat. Now that rhino ray had some textured teeth, but they were pretty small. They weren't pointy the way that we think of shark teeth. So I'm going to bring up a jaw. I have a jaw of of a shark, or a zebra shark. So this is a zebra shark. And if we look closely, it's got really pointy teeth, right? They're small, but they're really pointy. But if we look at the ray teeth, they're flat. We'll zoom out so we can kind of compare them. So the ray teeth here are flat. The zebra shark teeth are very pointy. So what that tells us is a little something about what they eat. So rays, they can eat crunchier things because they have those flat teeth, and those flat teeth can break into things like the shells of animals or the crunchy exterior of like a crab or a shrimp without breaking off their teeth. Imagine if you had really long teeth and you tried to eat something really hard like a shell, what do you think would happen to your teeth? They'd break, right? Because those sharp teeth can't break into the hard exterior. The teeth would break, not the shell. But a ray that has flat teeth, they're able to munch the shell and break it open and then eat the thing on the inside. And so we can tell that these animals are eating hard shelled things because they have flat teeth. Oh, I love, we got lots of questions coming in. Keep them coming. We love these questions. So we can tell that the ray is going to look for their food because their mouth is on the bottom of their body. And then when we look inside their mouth, we can tell that they're going to eat crunchier things because they have these flat teeth that are like hard plates. To me, it kind of looks like snake skin, but it's actually a really hard texture. And it's going to crush the shell. And then they actually spit out the pieces of the shell and they eat the squishy thing on the inside. So if you ever visit us here at the aquarium, sometimes in the exhibit, you might see the shells of these animals kind of sprinkled around the exhibit because they crunched the shell, they spit out the shell pieces, and then they ate the squishy food on the inside. All right, let's get to some of our more questions that came in. Ah, excellent question. So someone said, how do rays protect themselves if they don't have a stinger? And that's from Jameson. So I'm going to have Isabel bring up a picture in just a moment. So I'm going to bring up a picture, and I want you to take a look at this picture and see if you can tell how this animal how this animal protects itself. Sorry, I kind of gave it away there. How this animal protects itself if it doesn't have a stinger. So think about what are some other ways an animal might protect itself. Okay. What do we have here? Now it does just kind of look like a big picture of sand. I also for a moment was like, oh, these look like pistachios. Apparently I'm hungry. But anyways, this here is called a fiddler ray. And the fiddler ray is in this picture amongst all this sand and rocks. And the fiddler ray is another type of ray, but it doesn't have a stinger. So how do you think the fiddler ray protects itself? Well, it's showing us right here in this picture. It's hiding under the sand. So some rays, what they'll do is they'll kind of wiggle their body like this, and they'll dig themselves into the sand. And the color of their body, I know this fiddler ray doesn't really match the color of the rocks here, but think about like a sandy bottom. So the fiddler ray matches the same color of their habitat, and so they'll kind of shuffle their body, dig themselves under the sand, and then you can't see them because not only are they hiding under the sand, but they are blending in. And I bet a lot of you out there might know the word for when an animal is the same color as their habitat. On the count of three, we'll say it out loud. I don't want to shout it if you're in class, but on the count of three, we can say it all together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Camouflage. So some rays will camouflage. Now, those bat rays we were looking at before, if they're living in the sand or they're living in grass and they've got this kind of brown gray color, they're not really going to blend in. But a ray like our fiddler ray here, we also have round rays that live local to us here in California. We also have one called a shovel-nosed guitar fish, which even though it has fish in its name, we know that fish is a general term. It's actually a type of ray. And the color of their body is going to help them blend in with their surroundings, and that's how they're going to stay safe. So that is just one other way that a ray might stay safe if it doesn't have a stinger. There's another ray called a thornback ray. Now think about its name. Its name gives us a hint. If it's called a thornback ray, how do you think it stays safe if it doesn't have a stinger? Did you get it? You're right. It has thorns or little spines on its body. So that ray is kind of round, and then running down its back all the way through its tail, there are little thorns or spikes. Think about like a flower, like a rose that has those really sharp thorns. And if you grab it, it can hurt your fingers. Same with the ray. It's got thorns running down its back. So these animals, if they don't have a stinger, they have other adaptations, other things on their body that are going to help them survive and protect them the way a stinger would. They just don't have a stinger. Excellent. All right. Ooh, Olivia's got a good question. Are jellyfish related to stingrays? That's a great question. They are not related. So a jellyfish, I've got a jelly right here, is a really cool animal. But a jellyfish, something that is special about its body is it has no bones. It's what we call an invertebrate. Now that might sound confusing because I said that our sharks and rays, they don't have bones, but they have a skeleton, and that skeleton is made of cartilage. Jellies don't have any kind of skeleton, nothing hard in their body. So they're very different animals. We've got an invertebrate as our jelly, and then our rays, they are a type of fish. Great question. And Ariana wants to know how and what do rays eat. So we kind of talked about their mouth. So more specifically, rays eat things like crustaceans, which are like crabs and shrimp, and then mollusks, which are things like could be snails, clams. I can bring up, I think I've got some shells. Let me see if I can grab a shell or two that might show you the kind of animal that they might be eating. Let me look through what I've got. Aha. Here's a pretty common thing that shell from an animal. We'll go to my document camera. Like this. Now this animal would have a second shell here. And then there's a squishy thing inside. That's the animal. And so they would eat shelled animals like this. So clams, shrimp, crabs, pretty much whatever they can find living in the sand underneath them. All right, let's see. We got some more questions coming in. How deep in the ocean do rays swim? And that's from Lucille. Great question. Let's go back to Blue Cavern just to have something in our background. So this kind of depends on the type of ray. There are lots of different species of rays, and a lot of them do live in the shallows, like I mentioned. So those bat rays that we looked at, the cow nose rays, the round ray, the fiddler ray, they live in the shallows, so they don't live too deep, maybe anywhere from right along the shore to 20, 30 feet deep. And that's because they do want to feed on the ground. Now, here in Blue Cavern, as I mentioned, this exhibit's 28 feet deep. So our rays live in that deep water, but they don't want to have to swim super, super deep to find their food, and their food tends to live in more shallow water. So that's sort of the big key, is that even if they could go deeper, the food there's a ray. The food they eat tends to live in the more shallow areas, and so they're going to hang out where it's more shallow. Now, we do have a ray called a pelagic ray, and that word pelagic, that's a big word, but what pelagic means is open water. So we have some rays who do swim out in the open water, and they are going to feed a little bit different, but they tend to live in even deeper water. So it just kind of depends on the type of ray that we're talking about, that we're looking at, how deep they will swim. Maddie and Ernie want to know, what are their main predators? This is a really interesting question. So, they have some predators. It depends on the type of ray, but the biggest predators for rays would be sharks, which I know sounds interesting. They're related, but some larger sharks would be feeding on rays, and there are some whale species like orcas who will feed on rays. Now, for orcas or killer whales, there's one group of killer whales that feed on rays. So not all killer whales are going to feed on rays, but there is one group. They are offshore, so they live out in the open ocean, and they tend to feed on rays and sharks. So sharks eat rays, and then killer whales eat rays and sharks. It's kind of interesting to think about. All right, we've got more questions. So James wants to know, do rays have gills or nostrils? Let's bring up a picture of a ray where we can see. Let's look at the bottom first and then we'll look at the top because we need to look at both parts to kind of understand. Excellent. This is actually a pretty good view. So, first off, how happy does this ray look? So cute. This is an eagle ray. It's a spotted eagle ray that we have had here at the aquarium. And you can see really well their gills. Do you notice them? Can you see them? Which part of their body do you think is the gill? Go ahead and you can point towards your screen. You're right. So these lines, oops, too far, right here, these are the gills of our ray. Now we can count. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just like sharks who have 5 gill slits, rays also have 5 gill slits. And these are where they're going to be breathing from. Now let's think about it. We noticed, or we talked about how the rays sit on the bottom. So rays can't sit on the bottom of the ocean floor, right? They kind of hang out towards the bottom. So if they are lying on the bottom, how are they going to be breathing? That is interesting because they need water rolling over their gills to help them breathe. They're not breathing air like we are. They're taking tiny bubbles of oxygen out of the water and they're running it through their gills, and then their gills have these little hairs in them, and those hairs are going to catch those bubbles of oxygen. So they need to either be moving, because if they're moving, they can bring water in through their mouth and then over their gills. But some rays, they don't move. They take a rest on the bottom of their their exhibit, or the ocean floor. So if they're not moving, how are they getting water over their gills? Well, if we get a view of the top of a ray, rays have this special thing called a spiracle. Excellent. So this is the same ray. We're just now looking down on it. So this hole right here is called a spiracle. And we see spiracles in some sharks, but mostly in rays. And this spiracle acts like a pump. So when you see a ray sitting on the ocean floor, you might see it opening and closing. It almost looks like it could be a mouth opening and closing, but it's basically pumping water. And it's moving that water through the spiracle and then over the gills, which are on the underside, and it's helping them to breathe. So even if a ray is staying still, not moving, and they're kind of look like they're sitting on top of their gills, they can actually pump water over their gills to help them breathe. Take a moment and admire how beautiful this ray is. All right, I see we've got a couple more questions. We're almost out of time. If we don't answer your question on air, we will answer it in the text line, so keep them coming. But I'm going to run through our last few questions really quickly. So how big is the largest ray? So the largest ray is going to be the manta ray. We'll get the exact measurements, but there are a couple different types of manta rays. Oftentimes we hear manta ray, ooh, here we go, as sort of like a general term, but there's a specific type of ray called a manta ray. They look like these. And there's a giant version, and they are the largest ray. And we'll get you the wingspan, which is up to 29 feet. Oh my gosh. I'm even surprised by that. So imagine 29 feet across from one fin to the other. 29 feet. That's huge. If you think about a school bus is generally around 30 feet. So that means this ray's wingspan is the length of a school bus. That's amazing. All right, let's see. Last few questions. Oh, and then the last question, how many species of rays are there? There are about 600 known species of rays. Now, we like to say about and known because there's lots of parts of the ocean that are unexplored, and so there could be species we don't know about, but there's about 600 species. And today we talked about like 4 of them. So there are so many more ray species that we can explore. Now, I hope you do keep exploring. You can keep those questions coming, but we're going to respond with text because we are out of time. But if you are looking for more programming at 10 o'clock, we have another program coming up, and we're going to talk all about coral reefs. Thank you so much for joining today, for participating. Loved hearing your questions. Hope you had a good time. Bye, everyone.